Okay, hi Year 7. This video is like on time zones and time differences. So I'm looking at the part in your booklet which has the picture of Australia. It's in colour in your booklet. And it also has like a world map in it as well. Okay, I'm going to have a look at the Australian one first, okay? Now I've got to look at the sheet while I'm talking, so you need to have the sheet in front of you, okay? Hopefully you've printed them off, or at least you can look at it on your screen as you're listening to the video or something like that. Okay, so we're talking about time differences in Australia. Australia is basically divided up into 3 time zones. Forget about daylight saving. Okay, daylight saving does make things slightly more complicated, but when it's not daylight saving, Australia's in 3 time zones. So Queensland, New South Wales, ACT, Victoria, and Tasmania is called the Eastern time zone. That's the time zone we're in now, unless you're listening to me from somewhere else. The Central time zone is Northern Territory in South Australia, and the Western time zone is Western Australia. Okay, and the arrows above and below the maps, and it shows you New Zealand as well, which is all on a separate time zone, shows you how the time changes when you go from one place to the other. So when you look at the arrows, okay, if you were in Perth and it was, well, it doesn't matter what time it is, okay, and you called up your friend in Adelaide, okay, it says at the bottom there that it would be heading east, going from Perth to Adelaide in the direction of the arrow, plus 1.5 hours. So if it's midnight in Perth, it would be 1:30 a.m. in Adelaide at exactly the same time. Okay, the reasons for time zones is it's to do with how the sun is in different places relative to the Earth, depending on where you are on the Earth. Okay, because if it was the same time everywhere on the Earth at the same time, okay, if it was when it was 1 p.m. in Sydney, it was also 1 p.m. in London. Well, that means that 1 p.m. would be total sunshine in one place, but middle of the night in the other place. And that obviously wouldn't be very good. So that's why we have time zones. So everyone can sort of have a day where the day starts in the, at 5 or 6 or 7 a.m. and it ends, later on. That depends on other things as well, okay? It's complicated, actually. Okay, now if you were in Adelaide and you phoned your friend in Sydney or anywhere on the eastern side of the country, it would be half an hour later. Okay, so if it was 1:45 in Adelaide, it would be 2:15 on the eastern states. If you're in Sydney and you're calling your friend in Christchurch, New Zealand, which is a lovely, lovely little city, it's 2 hours. Okay, so 4 p.m. in Sydney would be 6 p.m. in Christchurch or anywhere in New Zealand at the same time. Okay. So we've got some questions to do here, and it basically says if it's this time in one place, what is it in the other place? Okay, and all you've got to do is do plus or minus the number of hours between the places. Okay, this is pretty easy sheet actually. Okay, first question 1 says if it is 10 a.m. in Perth, calculate the local time in the cities below. So what time would it be in Sydney? Well, if it's 10 a.m. in Perth and we've got to go to Sydney, we skip forward 1.5 hours and then we skip forward another half an hour because you've got to go from Perth to the Adelaide time and then from the Adelaide time to the Sydney time. So 1.5 plus a half is 2. So 10 a.m. in Perth would be 2 hours later in Sydney, 12 p.m. midday. Okay, let's do number 7. Okay, number 7 is if it's 10 a.m. in Perth, what time would it be in Wellington? Okay, well, to get all the way to New Zealand, you go 1.5, then a half, then 2. So it's 4 hours later. So 10 a.m. and then 4 more hours. Okay, you can think of it on the face of a clock if it helps. It would be 2 p.m. Okay, working the other way. Let's do question 18. Okay, question 18 is if it's 3 a.m. in Wellington, what is the local time in Darwin? Okay, so now we've got to go backwards because we're going in the opposite direction. We're travelling west now. So to get from Adelaide to where the Sydney time zone is, you go, to go from Wellington to go to the Sydney time, you go back by 2 hours, and then you've got to go back by another half an hour to get to Darwin time. So it's 3 a.m. minus 2.5 hours. Okay, that means it's going to be 12:30 a.m. Okay, so half an hour after midnight, in other words. Okay, let's do one of the ones with the clock face. Question 25. Okay, question 25 means if it's 2:30 in Melbourne, 2:30 p.m., what time is it in Darwin? Okay, so from Melbourne to Darwin, it's going backwards by half an hour. So half an hour before 2:30, well, that's going to be 2 o'clock. So we'll draw our little we'll draw our little clock face in like we used to in when did we do clock faces in primary school? Year 2, I don't know, kindergarten. So 2:30 goes back to 2 o'clock. Okay, just showing it on the clock face. Okay, that's the Australian one. That's not too hard. Let's do the world one. It's a little bit more interesting, I suppose. Okay, this is this one here. And so it gives you certain selected cities from around the world. Obviously, there's lots of other cities in the world and lots of other time zones in the world, but it's complicated to fit all of that onto one small map. Okay. I'll explain one thing to you. Okay. There's something called GMT. GMT means Greenwich Mean Time. And sort of all the time zones in the world are measured as being hours before GMT over here and hours ahead or plus of GMT over here. And Australia's in the plus zone. Sydney, for example, and Katoomba is 10 hours ahead of GMT. It's called GMT because there's a suburb in London called Greenwich, okay? It's sort of like, used to be a town, but now it's like a suburb of London, basically. And that's where the line is, where all the time zones sort of start from, and they go plus and forwards from that, okay? It's sort of like the place they decided, which was every other place would be measured from. Okay, so the first question is, if it is 10 a.m. in London, calculate the local time in the cities below. Okay, let's do the first one, going from London to Cairo. Okay, Cairo, as you might know, is in the country of Egypt. Okay, so it's 10 a.m. in London, here. We've got to find the Cairo time, which is here. Cairo is +2. That means it's +2 ahead of London. So we would have to go 10 a.m. +2. 10 a.m. +2 is 12 p.m. midday. That's the time it would be in Cairo. Okay, let's do another one. Let's do London to Sydney, okay? London to Sydney is, well, London's 10 a.m. still, because it says that in the question. Sydney is 10 hours plus. Okay, we call Sydney time GMT +10, because whatever time it is on GMT London, it's +10 in Sydney. So it's 10 a.m. plus 10 hours. Okay, well, how do you work that out? Okay, there's different ways of working that out. You can go 10 plus 10, 10 a.m. plus 10 hours is 20, 10 plus 10, but that's now in 24-hour time, so we have to subtract 12. So it would be 8 p.m. in Sydney. Another way of doing it is like, well, 10 a.m. plus 2 hours is midday, okay, but we have to add 10, not 2, so then we have to add another 8. So midday plus 8 hours is 8 p.m. Same answer. Okay. All right. So that's how to do that one. Now, the second column's a little bit harder, but I want to show you how to do the second column. Okay, because we're using New York as the reference this time. So New York over here, I have to hold this up. New York over here is 5 hours before London time, 5 hours behind GMT time. Okay. So the question says, if it is 10 a.m. on Friday, the 30th of April, what's that, 2002, goodness me, in New York, calculate the local time, AM, PM, day and date in the cities below. All right, so, sorry, I struggle to read in Mirror. So we've got to go, okay, let's do this one. Let's do the New Delhi one, all right? So, okay, so we've got to get from New York time to New Delhi time. New Delhi's over here. It's the capital of India. And New Delhi is that 5.5 or 5 1/4? 5.5. New Delhi is 5.5 hours ahead of London, and New York is 5 hours behind London GMT time. So the first thing we've got to work out is how far ahead is New Delhi compared to New York. Okay, so really, if you go 5.5 this way, and 5 that way, that works it out for you. And 5.5 plus 5 is 10.5. So the first thing we can work out is that New Delhi is 10.5 hours ahead of New York. Okay, now it says it's 10 a.m. in New York. Okay, and that's works out quite well because now we've just got to add 10.5 hours to that. Okay, and if we add 10 hours to 10 a.m., well, that would be 30 hours, okay, and that's the same as 8:30 p.m., okay? Or you can say, well, in 10 a.m. plus 2 hours is midday, but then we still have to add another 8.5 hours, and that's 8:30 p.m., okay? And conveniently for us, it's 8:30 p.m. on the same day because we don't go past midnight. So the day and date would stay the same. So I'll write that out, 8:30 p.m. same day, Friday, 30th of the 4th. Okay, I'm not going to do all those for you because they get a bit more challenging and you can have a bit of a challenge. All right, and then the last one, well, you've got to do it by just filling in the digital clock time. Okay, let's do one of those quickly. Okay, so in Tokyo, it's, oh, where are we? Okay, Tokyo local time is 10:25 p.m. because it has the dot down there for p.m. Okay, what's the time in Sydney at the same time? So from Tokyo to Sydney, we've got to look. Tokyo is +9 from GMT. Sydney's +10 from GMT. So that means that Sydney is 1 hour ahead of the Tokyo time. So all we've got to do for that one is add 1 hour to 10:25. Okay, we can work out that that's just going to be 11:25. And I will just fill that in with my pencil. Got to fill in the PM. Okay, so that would be 11:25. That's how we do those ones. Okay, this video is getting quite long, so I'm going to stop this video now. You've got the rest of this week, which is week 3, to finish off this booklet. Okay, I've probably got about 2 videos left into the booklet, and I'll do them later on in a few days. And then my information I've been given is that you'll have your quiz on time, on the unit on the time work that we've been doing. But I think they're going to do that as a Google online quiz as well, and I think that'll be soon. Okay, I'll let you know when I know, but I think that's what's happening. Okay, have a good day.